If you are familiar with activist circles in Canada, then you know Yves Engler. He is often heard at rallies, but he is also at politician-held press conferences. He is usually the one asking the exact question the politicians want to avoid. Yves Engler was just released from a 5-day stint in a Montreal prison. Unusual for a bail hearing, but again, there is nothing normal about any of what Yves Engler is currently dealing with. The author, activist, and father of two is involved in what can only be referred to as political persecution in a very convoluted and constructed web aimed at silencing critics of Israel here in Canada. Yves is with me now. Thanks so much for joining me on the line, Yves.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Yves, your case involves the Montreal police, a woman named Dahlia Kurtz, who is a self-described media influencer here in Toronto, and an attorney, Neil Oberman, who is currently running for office for Canada's Progressive Conservative Party. What are they exactly alleging against you?
Well, the police, on Tuesday of last week, the police told me they were charging me for harassing Dahlia Kurtz. And the harassment is basically responding to her anti-Palestinian posts on X. I've never emailed her, never messaged her privately, never met her, never talked to her on the phone, don't even follow her on X. So it's just literally her messages, which I consider highly, highly offensive, violent, racist, just responding to them. No doubt I respond to them with snark, referred to as fascist, as I think maybe genocide Dahlia at some point, maybe Holocaust Dahlia. I don't remember all the things I've written on X, but critical, never a threat of any sort. But yeah, so the police called me on Tuesday and said they were going to arrest me the next day, wanted me to come in to be arrested the next day for harassing Dahlia. And then I wrote about this, and multiple thousands of people emailed a Montreal police investigator saying to drop the charges. Mm-hmm. And then the next day, the police brought in 4 more charges that were now basically centered on harassing a police officer who I have never met. I didn't even know her first name. I had one phone conversation with her in my life, which was her calling me to tell me she was going to arrest me around the Dahlia Kurtz. So it's basically starts with this claim of harassing this anti-Palestinian media personality, and then the police basically added on charges that I was then harassing the police.
So, as you said, you've had no face-to-face interactions with Dahlia. Dahlia lives here in Toronto. You're in Montreal. And, I have been to protests. I saw Dahlia Kurtz on the campus of the University of Toronto when Shai Davide, this is the Columbia University professor, had come there to speak. And I've also seen her horrific and egregious messaging on her page on X. Yet, I just want to read out some of her messaging. This is for viewers who don't know who Dahlia Kurtz is. This is something she wrote on her page 5 days ago. Quote, "Gaza is still standing. The world has never witnessed such restraint." End quote. And then this is from 6 days ago. "The UN makes a statement about desalination systems in Gaza because Gazans are thirsty. But desalination won't solve that problem. Yes, they are thirsty, but they are thirsty for blood." End quote. So that's just a little bit of the taste of some of the virulent anti-Palestinian messaging that you were responding to on X. So you turned yourself in to the Montreal police on Thursday. I saw the video of you doing that. And I assumed that you would be released on bail, that afternoon or even right after. Instead, you're held for 5 days. Why?
Yeah, so initially when the police officer called me on the Tuesday, she said it would all take 15 minutes, that I would drop by, go to the detention center, be processed, and then be released. She didn't, in the initial conversation with me, didn't actually say this. Is when I asked my lawyer to call her back. She said to him that she was going to bring a condition that said that I couldn't talk about, I couldn't mention Dahlia Kurtz's name, and I essentially couldn't talk about the charges against me. So the police stuck to that, and I could have gone in on Thursday. They could have put the charges on me. They could have had put conditions. I told my lawyer I was fine with conditions that said that I would not, I never cared about mentioning the name of the police investigator that is now charging me with harassment. But I was willing to agree to not respond to Dahlia Kurtz on X anymore. I would block her myself. I should note, she's never blocked me on X. So
yeah, that's very important to point out. Yeah.
Very easy way to stop what you claim is harassment is just to block someone. They can't post on your posts. And so that never happened. But I said I was willing to, agree to that as a condition, but I was not willing to agree to any condition that restricted my ability to talk about Dahlia Kurtz and specifically talk about the charges against me that she's behind. And so the police basically, they don't release me. They send me before a judge later on the day via video on the Thursday. The Crown says they object to my release. So the Crown, again, could have just let me go with some conditions at that point, but they want to push this condition, which restricts my ability to talk about Kurtz and to talk about the case. We have a legal ruling, pretty clear-cut legal ruling. I'm not a lawyer, but it seems to me around this question of Crown trying to bring in these types of restrictions on a case that I would say is more, is actually a harassment case that has sort of no political backdrop to it. In this case, it very clearly has a political backdrop. Whether you believe I was harassing Dahlia or not, there's clearly a political backdrop. We're talking, and basically the judge said, no, you can't restrict people's ability to talk about charges against them in all media platforms, because that's, the legal system is public and this is part of the whole democratic process. But the Crown pushed it, and then on the Friday there was another hearing. Again, I was by video, but there was like 30 people in the courtroom supporting me, and they said, no, we can't. We still want these conditions, and it's going to push it off to Monday. And so anyway, I basically spent 5 days in jail over a condition that said I had the right, or that I wasn't restricted from talking about the case and Dahlia Kurtz, which I ultimately won. Before we even had a defense, the judge, just by listening to the Crown's case against me for this condition, the judge realized that this was a pretty clear infringement on freedom of expression. That was, ultimately an infringement of freedom of expression against Palestinians. I should note that that element to it as well. And the judge basically forced the Crown to negotiate with my lawyer over what I was willing to accept from, as of Tuesday afternoon, I was willing to accept that I would take a condition, but not that restricted me from talking about Dahlia Kurtz and talking about the charges against me.
You're a father of 2 young kids, and what was that time like in the cell for you? That's 5 days is a long time.
Yeah, well, so for my son, I've actually been, my partner, my wife, and my 2-year-old have been in Uganda for 2 months. They actually came back on Friday morning, and I was in jail, so I didn't get to see my 2-year-old until I got out on the late Monday. She obviously she wouldn't understand this. My 7-year-old, I told him, because I thought there was a chance I was going to be in jail Thursday night when I went to present myself Thursday morning after dropping me at school. I told him that he might be staying with his grandparents that night. I didn't suspect that I'd be in jail for 4 nights. He was told about it. He asked my dad, his grandpa, if his dad was a bad guy because he was in jail. Which my dad explained that the judicial system is a complicated process, and honestly, on a personal level, like a lot in jail was was annoying, was lots of very boredom. That's a lot of it. on a personal level, it wasn't traumatic for me. A lot of the people who I was there with and who had actually been in jail, in I think basically all of them many times, or at least for some time, they actually seemed to be more traumatic for them than it was for me. They all kinds of people with very difficult life circumstances. How I saw it, I mean, they talk about suicide at the detention center. They ask you about suicide, and in jail they ask you about suicide repeatedly. And it's basically people who are a lot of the people with lots of mental illness who are then put in a situation that exacerbates that mental illness and makes them even more likely to commit suicide. But yeah, personally, I got lucky on the Thursday night when I got to the prison. I got this really small pencil, and I did, at that moment I didn't understand how lucky I'd gotten. And basically allowed me to write. And one of the guys that was sort of in charge of my wing tried to take the pencil from me at one point, which I didn't let it. And the guard sort of tried to take it from me at one point. I kept it. And basically I was able to write, spend many hours writing. It was hard to get paper. I had to kind of use bags to write on and stuff like that. But yeah, jail was, it was unpleasant. I kind of consider it an experience. The not knowing and being totally powerless. So they totally messed up bureaucratically, it seems. And I was supposed to be in court on Monday, and I went early in the morning on Monday and said, at 7:30, why haven't I been brought down to the courthouse like I'm supposed to happen? And the guard said, no, you're not supposed to be in court until Tuesday. And I was pretty sure that was an error, but I wasn't 100%. The guard went and checked, said no, Tuesday, and I was like, okay, so I got another 24 hours in jail, and then you start thinking to yourself, well, maybe you'll just be in for the rest of the week, and maybe you'll be in. So there's these moments where you do get, confused about, first of all, why you're there. Secondly, how long it will go on. You have no control of anything. The guards, they dehumanize you. It's a very dehumanizing process. It's also, I think, quite dehumanizing for the guards themselves. But yeah, it was unpleasant, but it wasn't traumatic.
On the day of your bail hearing on that Friday, your father and wife Bianca spoke in the hallway of the Montreal courthouse, and your wife Bianca said that what is happening is much bigger than you. What do you think is at stake in your case?
Yeah, well, that was on the Monday where they spoke, and I think it's no doubt it's much bigger than me. A week before being arrested, I spoke on a panel titled "The New McCarthyism in Canada." And it was all about the attack against those opposing Canadian complicity with Israel's genocide. And there are innumerable examples across the country of people who had their houses raided, who've been arrested, who've been targeted with different types of policing or harassment for anything from as small as like social media commentary to going to a demonstration. The most egregious case is of a state abuse of authority targeting those opposing Canada's complicity in genocide. Of course, is the listing of Samidoun Palestinian Prisoners Network as a terrorist organization, and this is a grassroots group in Vancouver that is, campaigning against Israel's apartheid and genocide, and specifically around the more than 10,000 Palestinians in Israeli jails, and they basically got banned overnight by just the signing of a pen with little evidence. The claim is that they have a connection to a Palestinian group that's also on the terrorist list. But that's an incredible abuse of state power to give the state the ability to sort of just make illegal a grassroots organization, and so that's the most egregious example. But there's so many examples. The high profile example, of course, is the Indigo 11 or the Peace 11 of those who are alleged to have put up posters on a bookstore where the owner is being subsidized by the Canadian state.
This is the Hessek Foundation that Heather Reisman funds, the Lone Soldier Project, where she funds education for soldiers that basically go off and fight in Israel on behalf of the Israeli state.
Torontonians and Montrealers who
Yes.
move to Israel to join the Israeli military, then get compensated afterwards by Heather Reisman by, a series of ways, principally around, free education. And so this, they got their houses raided for allegedly putting up posters. So there's clearly a crackdown on anti-genocide activism. This is what I think that my case is fits within, and it needs to be resisted. Part of it is actually a positive in the sense that it's a reaction to the level of activism that is transpired against Canada's complicity in Israel's genocide. This is an unprecedented popular uprising against Canada's complicity in imperialism or violence abroad. If you look at the history of Canadian foreign policy, there's never been a movement as strong as this past 16 months. Obviously, it's a weakening movement today than at different points has been a bit stronger. But over the past 16 months, there has been an incredible number of demonstrations, actions, etc.
There is a massive swell of solidarity, even the massive swell of solidarity for you outside the courthouse. There was nearly 100 people there. But what's the danger, though, that I'm seeing is that we're seeing Montreal police. We're seeing police coddling supporters of genocide. We're seeing supporters of genocide playing the victim here and having the police acting on their behalf. I want to ask you about Neil Oberman. This is, it seems that his law firm is the one that brought this case forward on behalf of Dahlia Kurtz. What do you know about Neil Oberman?
Yeah, well, this business about the police acting, coddling or acting on behalf of genocide supporters is kind of interesting how this played out because Dahlia Kurtz goes to the police, making allegations against me. They have an interview process. This all came out. The Crown explained all this in court on Monday. They have an interview process on this, and however the procedure usually works. And the police decide there's nothing here. They suspend the investigation.
And when was that?
That's some point. I think it's in October. So
Okay.
she goes in I think in July. I don't remember the exact date. Some point in the summer, and the process plays itself out, and they decide there's not really anything here. Then Neil Oberman, who is a lawyer here in Montreal, who maybe we'll get to in a second, but been behind a whole bunch of these lawfare cases around Palestine in the past year or so. Then he writes a letter in mid-December to the police in defense of Dahlia Kurtz, or in support of the fact that police should charge me. And then the file gets opened back up, and 2 months later they move to charging me. So Neil Oberman is the Conservative candidate in the riding that Anthony Housefather is currently the sitting MP. Anthony Housefather, of course, is a very well-known, staunch
Liberal Zionist, yes, yeah.
And so Oberman is running to the Housefather's not enough of a Zionist for him, and you should vote for Neil Oberman. And so what he's been doing, it seems, over the past 14 months, a year, however long exactly, is he's launched a whole bunch of legal cases to try to basically get to undercut Palestine activism. The one that got the most attention is he's the person behind the injunction targeting the encampment at McGill University. And he proposed an injunction that restricted protests. I believe it was 200 meters. It may have been as much as 500 meters, but it was 200 meters from any McGill building in downtown Montreal. Not just around Palestine. It was all protests. And now McGill owns lots of buildings in downtown Montreal. So if his injunction would have gone forward, it would have almost, it would have restricted demonstrations.
Eradicated protests to begin. Yeah.
Downtown Montreal. And fortunately, the judge, denied this injunction. But this was a quite high profile. I actually, at the court in April, when this injunction got brought before the judge, I actually interviewed Oberman. I asked him if about 15,000 Palestinian children being killed was too much for him, and he refused to answer. And I had a bit more of an interaction with him in the court. He actually accused me of trying to intimidate him in the courtroom, and I tried to get the security to kick me out of the court, which they didn't do because I had done nothing. I was sitting in a seat. But anyways, so Oberman has been he's been using this stuff, these injunctions, for his political campaign very clearly. The Suburban newspaper, which is focused on Anglo Jewish community in Montreal, that's has talked about Oberman, this sort of celebrated him as this doing all this legal work against Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
And so Oberman is he was there on Monday at court, and he was there by a video link, and there with the name of his law firm in the background. I don't know if that was meant as a way to communicate something to the judge or in some way sort of like politically like that, but yeah, he's clearly an important player in this. I mean, we know that Dahlia Kurtz tried to do this process on her own with the police, and the police dropped it. So he and the police officer initially, right away, tells me when talking about the charges that she refers to a legal firm and kind of frames it in this sort of important legal firm is asking about this case, and so that it presumably influenced, or we know it influenced the decision to take the charges forward. But yeah, there's the hypocrisy of a lot of these conservatives who claimed about free speech and stuff like that.
Yeah, the absolutists of free speech. It doesn't seem to apply to everybody. I want to play you a bit of a tape that I found of Pierre Poilievre talking about Oberman and get your reaction to it. I'm hoping you can hear this. Let me know if you can hear it.
Of course, is challenging to represent the conservatives in Royal. Of course, Neil was the one who got numerous of these injunctions to shut down anti-Semitic riots, and he has stood up for the Jewish community against the violence, the hatred that is spilled onto our streets, and we need him on the floor of House of Commons to continue to champion those values.
So you can hear Poilievre there calling him Oberman the Doberman, with referencing the dog. And what do you make of Poilievre pushing Oberman in this way?
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable. I didn't realize it reached all the way up to Poilievre. Basically, what makes this an important political figure is because he uses the legal system to target those opposing genocide. That's a fairly remarkable kind of way of promoting a politician. I don't think history will not judge that one very kindly. But yeah, I mean, that I guess speaks to how where Pierre Poilievre is on supporting genocide and Israel's crimes. I mean, if this is framed as the reason to bring somebody in the House of Commons, that they have tried to block demonstrations in much of downtown Montreal because they don't like the fact that some students call on their university to divest of arms companies providing weapons to an Israeli military killing Palestinians. I mean, that's a pretty damning comment on the state of Canadian political culture, and more specifically, Conservative Party political culture.
And I came across a letter that PEN Canada wrote, actually, on your behalf to the mayor of Montreal and Montreal police chief in your defense that read in part, PEN Canada takes the position that it is not a crime to take a pro-Palestinian stance in public. It is not a crime to object to those who support Israel's actions or to describe them as fascists. It is not a crime to criticize or condemn the state of Israel. What does it tell you about the times that we're living in that PEN Canada would have to write something like that?
That's pretty bad. I mean, As I posted in response to Penn's statement on my X, the headline to me is author spends 5 days in jail to win the right to be able to write about charges brought against him for criticizing Israel and the Montreal police. And, this should not be needed. The Montreal police should know they can't move forward, and the Crown should know they can't move forward with charges and conditions specifically that restrict an author, a commentator, an activist, anyone, let alone just an individual, from being able to write about, talk about, or as the judge pointed out, to put what are those billboards on yourself, right? As saying, I criticize Israel, I criticize Dahlia Kurtz's anti-Palestinian racism. So yeah, it's troubling that Penn Canada would need to put out that statement. I'm happy they have done so. But I think it is nice also to have got this small little win for freedom of expression. I hope that the judge forcing the Crown to drop these condition will have some kind of bit of a broader judicial ramification. I think that the people, I have to say, it was amazing. There was apparently 100 people that showed up at the courthouse Monday morning. And then when I left, it was released at 7 after 7 o'clock in the night. There was still 30 plus people there who were there to greet me and rallying. And so there was really an outpouring of solidarity. And I think people were also very happy there was a win, which is important in the context of seeing so much obviously devastation that Israel's done in Gaza, but also the fact that people do feel fear, right? Like people feel fear. And there's an attention in engaging in this stuff. Is like, I feel I've had many, many conversations with people who I feel that it's good to have a degree of skepticism of state power and knowledge that there's a whole history of repression, anti-war. I mean, it killed people in Quebec City during World War I. They killed Ginger Goodwin during World War I for a pacifist opposing conscription. If you look at the history in Canada, World War II, the mayor of Montreal was thrown in jail, the head of the Siemens Union. If you look at in the 50s during the Korean War, you have Endicott, the head of the Canadian Peace Congress, his house was firebombed. This Lester Pearson, the external minister, did all kinds of stuff to try to target him and harass him and stuff like that. So there's a long history of repression against anti-war forces, peace forces, and stuff like that in Canadian history. So we should be aware of that, and we should obviously push back against it. But there's a line between being, sort of skeptical of state authority and being, sensibly paranoid, and then crossing into where paranoia becomes don't act. The state is all powerful, and they're targeting you, coming after you. And no, we have a fair bit of liberty, right? There's many egregious cases where they repress our rights, but we have a fair bit of liberty. And it's really important to assert that, and to not just assert it so we keep having that liberty, but also to stop the Canadian complicity in the genocide. This is the real issue here, is stopping the Canadian government from continuing to, have charities that support the Israeli military, that trade accord that supports Israel, that the solidarity trips of Melanie Joly, the foreign minister, to Israel. There's all these different ways.
The numerous MPs that have gone also.
MPs have gone, and so we want to stop that. We want to stop that complicity, that support, as a way of weakening Israel's ability to continue to massacre Palestinians, and so we don't want to go too far with the paranoia about the state, because it leads to people not acting. So I'm happy to have this sort of small win, and I think people perceive it as that, and it was, and hopefully that bolsters people's sense of, like, we're not going to accept this repression. We're going to fight it. We have rights, and we are right. We're morally right in what we're doing. It's, very clearly. So
you're due back in court on April 25th. Is that correct?
Yeah, and so
what happens on what happens on that day?
I think the first day is going to be pretty pro forma, setting up some dates of the lawyers can meet and when the actual process is going. I obviously hope that the Crown's just going to decide this is all farcical and drop it all. I'm kind of skeptical of that now because I think they committed so much to the whole conditions against me. If they were to just drop it all now after like keeping me in jail for 5 days around a condition, that would be a pretty embarrassing result for the Crown. But my lawyer is pushing hard to get a prosecutor on the file because we want to move forward. You know, I'm not worried about, you know, being jailed for this, right? Even if I was found guilty of this stuff, 5 days in jail is probably more than would actually be brought against me. I obviously believe that I have a very strong case, want to win it to get it, you know, out of the way on a personal level, but also at a broader level that you know, we have the right to respond to violent anti-Palestinian influencers with
absolutely, absolutely. I've gotten a lot of requests from people because I've been speaking out about your case over the past week, and people want to know how they can help you, whether it's with legal fees or anything. Where can people find you? Where can they go?
Yeah, I mean, from a donation standpoint, on my website, there's a donate button to people, and people have been very generous in donating over the past a few days. There's two letters. It was the second letter, public letter, calling on to the head of the Montreal Police and to the mayor of Montreal, calling to drop the charges. I think there's going to be some more stuff coming in the next couple days or couple weeks on the issue. So I guess, you know, people can, you know, follow me at yvesengler.com, yvesengler.com. I post lots of articles about Canada's role in with Israel, but also on all kinds of different, mostly on foreign policy. So people, if they're interested in that, I do things like a Canadian Foreign Policy Hour. Every Monday night, I do a 1 hour show about a kind of roundup on Canadian foreign policy. If people are interested in that, so through my website.
So I will also link to that in the show description here. Thank you so much, Yves, and we will update people on your case as it moves forward.
Thanks a lot for having me and talking about the case.